Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dylan. I'm your host, joined by my blue collar badass. And I hear you have something in store for me today, Matt.
That is right, Dylan. So we are lucky enough today that unfortunately our guest bailed last minute, but such is the life in construction. And I had some topics kicking around my head, so we're going to do a little bit different of a format than we have before, than everybody's used to. So what I was thinking is I've got three topics here, not necessarily questions, but I'm going to throw them at you and kind of pose questions around them. Get your take on how to implement and do these things, and then we'll just kind of see where it takes us.
Sounds good, man. Yeah. And just for context, our guest is driving a dump truck right now. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the life of construction, right? The guy he was feeling all bad when he had to cancel. I'm like, brother, it's this is how it works. Shit pops up and you got to take care of it. So obviously the podcast is secondary at that point.
for sure. For sure. All right. Let's roll.
All right, man. So first topic, and I'm going to pose this coming from a construction company office. So I want your thoughts on how to implement some of these things. So the first one is how to get across through your culture a general aggressiveness and a lack of putting up with any sort of mediocrity. So Andy Frisella talks a lot recently about this perfect and fast concept. And full disclosure, I'm bringing that into our office with mixed results. But the idea, is we're going to strive for perfect and fast in everything we do. And on a theoretical level, right? It's great in my mind. We got to aim for this. We got to have huge goals. We got to attack things right away, and we need to do it perfect, and we need to do it swiftly so that nothing lingers. But how would you say the best way to kind of spread that general aggressiveness, and not aggressiveness in a bad way, but aggressiveness against mediocrity and against issues that frankly, so much of society in general has a problem with?
Man, it's so for me, I think back to like all the places I've worked, all the projects that I've done over the years. And so the first job that I had for 5 years, and it was all arc flash stuff. I did like 70 or so reports, went to more sites than that. And with that, I was able to crank out arc flash reports, especially by the end of it, very, very quickly. Right. We did the same stuff. I had like a verbiage document and template that I work from. And in that, because like again, it was an internship, then I went full time. So like I was very well versed in all of this, went in the field, knew all the engineering stuff, and could crank out a report quickly. The thing is, like when I was young, not to say that I'm not still, but like, at 21 to doing this was, I was so fast that I would have, there would be some little errors, right? So when it came for review, people would pick up on things and they're like, man, just take your time and go through it. And to me, it was like, so then I would just sit on stuff, and I, wait half a day and then review it again just with fresh eyes. Cause again, it was all reports, right? Word docs, which again, in the construction world is so much what we do is just reports, paperwork, right? You're making sure that a submittal looks right. And within that, you do need some fresh eyes to look over something, right? If you're a project engineer on a job and you're just spending your day going through submittals, at some point your eyes are just going to glaze over and you're not going to get it correct. So like sitting on it doesn't help anything, right? You still have to come back to it, review it again. And but in there, it's not sitting on it to just for the sake of sitting on it. It's sitting on it so that you can come back with fresh eyes to review it. And looking back, that's how I should treated it. But I really just sat on it because they were like, you need to take your time for it. And that's how I treated it. But I think that conveys to a lot of how, a lot of us end up working, right? We just sit on stuff because, you turn around too fast. Now you're setting expectations for clients that you might not always be able to meet, but they have that expectation. So in there, in the aggressive and fast, I'm just using submittals as an example, is you need to be, accuracy matters more than speed, but they both matter, right? Like it's probably a 60-40 split, right? Like accuracy is going to matter more, but getting it done in a timely fashion, right, matters greatly too. And so again, as a young engineer, I got through stuff super quickly. But again, I had to go back, and it didn't take me long to like adjust the mistakes that were in the reports. And again, this is why you have a second set of eyes review stuff, and that's been ingrained in me, is so that you have somebody check your work before you send it out the door. So in the submittal land and paperwork, like you do and should have a second set of eyes, whether it's just your admin to look for grammatical stuff, or it's a team member to look for technical details or any questions that you might have on it. And then there's the timeliness of like when you need to turn them around. Now in submittals, obviously the sooner the better. That helps speed the project up. Every day, adds a few on the back end. So in a thing like submittals, you need to be quick and aggressive for it. And a lot of projects, emails, responses, and a lot of this too. And like we've talked about in a lot of things, right? It can wait a day, but a lot of that is so that, again, going back to, you need to take the time to review it a second time, or you're waiting for a second set of eyes on that particular item, right? That you don't have an immediate answer that you're 100% confident in, right? You have something that you're an 80, 90% confidence level on, that you need to like have a conversation with somebody, that you're not going to give an answer immediately. You need to have that conversation and then get back with somebody. So you're sitting on it, but not in a way that you're delaying anything, right? You're sitting on it to get the right answer, so that when you give it, there's not going to be ramifications down the road that are negative, to the project, to the company, whatever. It's going to be the right answer and the right way forward, and then you'll deal with it from there. So in the everyday workflow, I think we have it goes one of two ways. Either nobody ever looks at the documents, right? They never review anything and they just sit on it. They never get to it, and that's a problem. Or on the other side, they get to it and they don't review it thoroughly enough and they just ship it out the door. So there has to be a middle ground and a process, and probably a second set of eyes on a lot of things. And now, granted, like most of us don't do that, right? And for the majority of things, it's going to be fine, right? Like there's the vast majority of submittals that you get, the things that you're looking for. And if you have a young engineer, a young superintendent, whatever it might be on it, like they're going to have somebody review it, or should, right, in that process. And it's usually the old guys that are doing well through it. They rarely make a mistake anyway, but it's that balance of, hey, you need to do as well as you can here, have a check if you need it. And, sometimes, we might not think we need one, but probably should. And then, get it out the door. So, and that's in like the day to day. Now, marketing and that type of aggressiveness is another thing that I like to handle. But let's, what's your take on the, everyday workload?
So you brought up some interesting points, and ones that I can relate very, very clearly and closely to, because so when I came on board to the construction company 6 years ago, I brought with me a couple of different things. Well, I brought with me a lot of things, but a couple in particular here. So a style of conceptual estimating that frankly a lot of people don't understand and just can't do. And a grasp of pretty complex projects and how to break these things down into our conceptual estimating templates, and how to go after these sort of projects. So my point is, I had, it was twofold problems, right? So I was doing these estimates, very high level estimating on very complex and very large projects. And my normal self would, in previous life, like we had review processes, and you would go and you would get extra sets of eyes. Well, where I was when I started, there were no sets of eyes available, right? That could understand and grasp what they were really looking at enough to be useful and not just a hindrance. And so for the first 2 years, 3 years, even maybe even longer than that, I would just pump out estimates and proposals, and I was the only guy looking at them. And it was dangerous as hell. I would double check and triple check, but it's like when you have a scratch on the wall at your house, right? You don't have kids, but when you come see my house, like, it looks like a bomb went off in some of those rooms, right? They throw a football and it dents the drywall, and you see it the first time and you get all pissed off and you're like, damn it, we got to fix this. Well, then, like, time goes on and you keep walking past this same dent in the wall, and eventually you don't see it anymore. You've spent so much time with the dent that your brain just kind of pushes it back into the ether. And the same thing happens with estimates, with writing reports, with things of any level of detail, right? Our brains always seek to expend as little energy as possible to keep us awake and aware and looking out for the fucking lion, right? That's how we survive as a species. But so that's what I was doing with proposals. And it got to a point where I was like, this is scary. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know who to turn to. And I'd bring stuff home and have Carrie review it. But I mean, she could review, proposals and formatting and things like that, but she's not a construction girl, right? So, what we have now is vastly different. Now we have 3 people in our office that are very high level conceptual estimators, and we have that comfortable review process back in place. And while some people get pissed, like, hey, why do I have to do this twice? Or why do you have to look at it after he looks at it? And there's such a good reason for it that it becomes very apparent. Because in our line of work, if we're not perfect, we're going to die, right? I mean, an estimate error at the level we're working at could cost 7 figures all day long or more. And if we're not fast, we're going to lose the damn project anyways. And so in my mind, I keep pumping perfect and fast. Let's do this. Fast is not to mean inefficient or without care, but fast, like, we have a deadline. Let's get this done. If we can get it before the deadline, great. But there is no second option, right? If you're late, you're dead. If you make a mistake in the estimate, you're dead. And that's how we have to live. So, just getting extra eyes on things and formulating a specific process to review whatever you're pushing out is so important. Because it goes back to everything you and I have talked about: relationship building and reputation building and caring for. You are what the product of your work is. And if you're putting out shit, then people think you're a shitty contractor or a shitty estimator or a shitty engineer or a shitty software guy. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're not putting in 100% of your care and effort and producing perfection, in quotes, that's how you're going to be looked at. You're going to be looked at as a mediocre, whatever you are. And it's a bad place to be.
So the only thing that I would add on that is, oftentimes, so this goes for Revit templates, this goes for your estimating template, this goes for any system process that you have, is 2 things. As you come across an issue, right? So this is often like in Revit families in the production of drawings, right? For you, it could be a formatting thing. It could be a contract, paragraph, whatever. Add it as soon as possible to that template, right? Like, fix that piece, that family, fix that verbiage, fix that whatever it is as soon as possible. Because what I find is you then end up fixing it on every project moving forward, or it never got fixed. And in the case of contract verbiage, never gets added. And then you are hosed on every project going out. And at the speed you run at, right? If you're doing 1, 3, 5, 100 estimates a week, right? That adds up fast in the amount of problems it can cause down the road. So one is really the only addition that I have to it is fix anything that you find a problem with as soon as possible, because it will speed up and improve everything moving forward. And you've just integrated it into that project, right? Don't wait. You need approval on like that project, right? So if it got approved in this proposal and that, verbiage quote, or you have a template file of all your verbiage stuff, right? So for this project type, here's our, 4 verbiage paragraphs that we need to include to make sure that we're not going to get hosed on it. Like those get added into some document and repository that you can come back to then pull into whatever you're working on. And if it's standard, like, price escalation clauses and all the things that you never had before COVID that you now have, right? Like that gets added in as you move forward through projects.
Yeah, fix it fast. It's back to my rip the Band-Aid off, right? In all problems, if you look at your problems as a wound, the faster you tear the Band-Aid off and get some of the badness out, some of the bad blood, the faster you can actually fix it and control the problem. And it goes across all facets of everything we do, not just business. It's lifestyles also. And you got to have that mentality shift that the longer you let things linger, the worse they get. And it really doesn't matter what they are.
Yep.
Unless it's wine.
Wine and whiskey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only other, so what I want to come back to too on the aggressiveness piece is in marketing. So for our business, in construction, man, we have to go after a lot. You've got to go after way more projects than you think you're going to win. So one of the things that at one of the A&E firms that I worked at, where I had to be a part of, as a department head, I had to be a part of all the proposals and everything that we put out. There was one office that we had of our 4 offices that decided they would chase every single RFP that got put out there. And this caused some dramatic problems because they won one of them, right, out of the 50 or whatever. So they thought that they could, that this was a recipe for success, that they won one RFP and therefore we could do this on every project. Problem is their track record was like 2% win rate, right? Or whatever it ended up being. So we spent a lot of time, because they won one on an RFP process, that we then lost, subsequent others. What this meant was, and part of the process in that RFP and what we later discovered, is they made, I think, 3 or 5 calls to that owner prior to RFP being released. That's how they won. They had a conversation, or 5, before that RFP was released. So they had a relationship with the owner, which made them, actually win it. And then everything else, that the only time that we met the owner was in a RFP presentation, that was a loss every time. And now we are labeled as losers. So what I have found is, and, just in my own experience with Cowabunga and with, a lot of the other guys that we talk to, off mic here, man, you have to go after a lot of projects. You need to be pretty confident in your ability to close those projects. But even still, even if you have a relationship, it's probably 50-50 on the majority of the projects you're going after. Whether it's financing that falls through, whether the site got taken that they wanted, or zoning didn't get approved, or, the umpteen other issues that are not your fault for a project not to move forward, right? Or you just didn't get selected for it. So whatever those roadblocks are, you have to go after, and some of them are going to be 30%. So you need to propose 3-5 times more projects than you think you're going to win, or whatever your target is for the year, right? Say you want to do whatever it is, $10 million in revenue. Let's just use that, or $100 million, pick a revenue number. Say you want to do 100 million, like, in revenue, and you're used to doing 20. So you want to 5X it. Well, you need to do not just 5X the number of proposals, you need to do probably 25X the number of proposals or estimates out to the marketplace. And then as you win them, you need to have a plan in place to hire behind it, but do not hire preemptively. And we did this in some of the engineering firms where I saw the amount of work we had, and it was like, hey guys, if you actually think we're going to win like a good chunk of these projects, just on an hours basis alone, like my whole department of 10 are now working, 80-hour weeks for the foreseeable future. I need a guy, right? And then they're like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. And so, but like no one ever thought of it to look at like what the actual workload is because of what I just described, right? They had the experience that I didn't, but their confidence level was such that, we were going to win all these. So they skewed their confidence levels in winning projects. And this is the other thing in like being realistic around this and what you're going to win or not. But some of it is you just got to wait till the chips fall and then be prepared to quickly hire and backfill behind you so that you have that pipeline to execute the work, right? Or a system for it. But you have to be way more aggressive than you ever thought you needed to in going after work, and especially if you're looking to grow.
Well, two things. One, the hiring thing, you're right, but it's a double-edged sword, right? It's really hard to gauge when is the right time to start staffing up, because you can't do it too early, because then there's nothing for these people to do, but you also can't do it too late, because depending on the roles you're hiring for, there's a honeymoon period that you got to get through before someone is really rocking and rolling, and it is a delicate balance, man. And then there's no good answer, right? There's no magic formula that can tell you like, all right, here's the day when you start hiring this many people and then progress. It doesn't happen like that. So it's definitely something to pay attention to. Real quick on the aggressiveness topic though, you just let out some of the secret sauce in this industry. We could charge thousands of dollars for what you just said. The RFP process, whether it's public, private, or however it's put out there, the act of reaching out directly to an owner, going around the gatekeeper and getting an audience and starting that relationship is so unbelievably powerful. I can say personally, we have won, I'm not putting a dollar value on it, a lot of money, a lot of dollars in contract value because of doing exactly what you just said. Because in this cutthroat world that we operate in, you have to differentiate yourself. And if you don't know someone already, that's very hard to do. And you nailed it. Like, you don't win many projects when you walk in with your proposal binder and your fancy clothes on, and that's the first day that you meet these people. That's very low odds. It's very hard to win someone over within a meeting is an hour, 2 hours maybe. But sneaking around the gates and getting in front of those people, and even if it's just on the phone, just starting to have those conversations as early as you can is hugely powerful. And I almost debated cutting you off when I saw where you were going, because it's the secret sauce. It's part of it, right? That's one of the main ingredients in that sauce, and we just gave it away for free, folks.
Yeah, I mean the thing is like no one's gonna do it. And then like the other side of that, I mean, if you do want to win, I mean like Oren Claff, in his books like flip the script, and he wrote another one, Pitch Anything, like that. These are the books, like if you are going in cold to owner, like, or any presentation proposal where you have one meeting, one pitch, one thing to win the deal, like he's the guy for that. But I mean, in there, it's also like 4 weeks to craft one pitch to go in and do one proposal. He's doing a lot of like venture funding and stuff like that, or he's got one shot at getting it right and doing it to close a deal, right? So he's spending weeks at a time with like research guys and all this stuff around what he's doing to close these deals. And for some of you, maybe that's worth it, right? For some projects that it might be worth it, right? Like a new stadium project. If you're going after $1 billion stadium, you probably should put some time and effort into it. But if you're going after like I guess this varies in all levels, right? But like if a project is that important to you to go after, conversations are first and foremost the easiest thing you can do to position yourself better to win. Going in there cold, no matter who you are, is going to be tough, right? And if you don't have if you're not HOK or Gensler going in the door, or Jacobs, like, I'm sorry, you need to come up with something better than that, right? They can come in and say, we're HOK and you hire us. This is our portfolio. What else do you need to know? sign here, right? Like, it's never that easy, but you know, you come in with brand recognition, you have a lot of credo, and most of us don't, right? We're the local guy, we're the guy that's going to take care of them, we're the guy that's going to be there, and that's how we want to. So many of our engineering projects is like, you want a local engineer, because when shit breaks, which it will, you're going to call us, not the guys 1,000 miles away.
We liken it in our office to an Army Green Beret or Ranger sniper, right? If you're a sniper, you get one shot at pulling that trigger usually. And sometimes these guys will be out in the bush or hiding, whatever they do for days on end, just making sure they're so prepared, and that when they pull that trigger, that's it. It's lights out for the bad guy. And that's how it is when you don't have a means of entry ahead of time to get to know who you're talking to. You get to that conference room or that boardroom, like, you have one shot, and if you miss, you're done. And you're not just done for that project. You're usually done for any project, because you're the loser, right? And right, wrong, or indifferent, that's you're now the loser, and that's an even harder thing to come back from.
All right,
So let's go into
excellent.
number two, because it kind of wraps into this a little bit. Admittedly, this is a problem I have had in our office, and I'm still working on with some folks, but we're gonna hash it out here. So how do we get others to be as comfortable being uncomfortable as I am, right? It kind of ties into that whole thing. We're always putting ourselves into positions and situations where it's uncomfortable. We're meeting new people. We're presenting projects that we've never presented before. We're talking about different ways of building, and there's always something. And you and I have talked at great length about the value, personally and professionally, of being able to function at a high level in those situations, and getting to a point where you actually enjoy it. But how do you, as a business owner, as a leader, start pushing that mentality down the ranks to your people?
Man, so the way that I think about this is, um for each person, it depends on what, like, and I don't mean to make this a depends answer, but it's not everyone should be doing sales, right? Like, not everyone's going to make cold calls or ever feel comfortable doing it, nor should they. Not everyone's going to feel comfortable like going up and introducing themselves to somebody at a meeting, but they're more than happy once the ice is broken or they get brought in to have a conversation for hours after that, right? They can't get past the first two sentences,
Yeah.
and they're always just going to have trouble with that. But after that, right, then they're going to move forward through there, right? That then they're fine with it. It's the approach that they have problems with, not the rest of it. And then, as far as like having hard conversations or towing the line, um, man, like, and I hate to say this, but not everyone in the organization needs to have those conversations, right? Like, they need to know that they can have the conversation internally with like their manager, right? So whenever some like shit really hit the fan for the departments that I was in charge of, like, I had to be the guy to come in and have all the hard conversations or deal with the issues in hand or change orders or whatever if they didn't feel comfortable with it. I went to the meetings, I talk through it and see what resolution we could come to. Like, my guys never needed to, if they didn't want to, like, they didn't have to. And again, some of this is just going to come with experience and age. And the other problem that we have in construction is our cycle times are so long, right? Like, from one project to the next, you might go 3-6 months without a change order and having that conversation. You might go a year without an RFI. Like, those conversation, like, it's not every day, and like you just get inundated with like, how do I talk about money, and like the owner needs to pay more, right? Like, hopefully you're not having that conversation every day. If you are, you got bigger problems.
You're in the wrong business, man.
But a lot of it is just that, right? Like, you can inundate yourself in pushing harder every day in the gym. You can inundate yourself in like not reaching for that drink every day, like it's a daily action, and making cold calls. Like, you can inundate yourself to a point in like picking up the phone and getting past that introductory thing. in our world where you have that cycle time that's so high, there's people that are just going to be built for hard conversations. And on the other side of that, I mean, in sales, it's always like role play, role play, role play. And again, do you want to have a culture too where like you're role playing like somebody yelling at them, right? And then after it's like, no, man, it's okay, right? Like, don't worry about that, right? You go back to it's just like family, but at some point you're going to get some animosity for this guy that comes and yells at you every day, right? Like,
Right. Right.
so I see that like one in building like the ability to do harder things, the ability to push yourself in different ways. One in like getting uncomfortable. The easiest way to do that is really to give your people opportunities to go and do difficult things, right? To go do training, to go so conferences are not the place to go because you can duck out if you choose to, and you don't have to go through the uncomfortable thing. But it's more like going and doing like a training program where like I mean I went to 3-7, right? There was no getting out of doing the training. Like you showed up and you checked in and you're there, right? You're committed. And if you quit, like somebody's gonna know. So putting yourselves or giving your people opportunities to go to like actual training, whether that's stuff like 3-7 when you're romping around the woods or going to like other could be its public speaking workshop and training thing, where they get a certificate at the end. So you as like the boss would know that they did it, right? There's other, they run a marathon, you do a charity run, right? Or give people those opportunities to participate in these different events. Like one of the offices I worked in, we did a, leukemia fundraiser deal. So, I mean, there's one is giving people the opportunity to go and do it. Like most of the offices, I was the only one that ever spent my own money and or went to conferences, right? Like to go learn anything outside of work was just like not heard of, to go to a Tony Robbins event or 10X or, now Arte and stuff like that. Like just people never went and did personal development because the company never offered it. Like they didn't know any better. So one is giving people opportunities. Two, I mean, I don't know, like I've personally pulled 3 people through a marathon, right? And so yeah, 3. So and then I've encouraged other people, they got up and they ran a 10K or half marathon or whatever. And so through like that, like it's because I've been the example where people can go and do these things. So one, it's being the example. Two, it's giving people the opportunities to go and do it. And then 3, like they've got to be around, you know, they've just got to experience it and be around it, right? When you're going to have those hard conversations, you got to bring the people in. And luckily, like in my career, I've always just been in the position to be around those hard conversations. I went to the meetings, I, learned from my bosses, or it was like, you're here, you kind of need to have it or not. And it was like, well, I'll get back to you, and let me take a note of whatever the problem is, the issue is, and let me get back to you to figure this out and then come back and let's have a conversation. Um, yeah, I mean, those are the 4 ways to put people through it.
So I think there's a lot to unpack there. Um, Again, I'm going to keep going back to myself because I'm an easy example for me. I'm a very introverted person by nature, very, very much so. I have a very hard time jumping into public situations, and Arate, while it's been great for me, it's also really hard for me to like go to events and just start talking to strangers. I have a hard time doing it, but you can learn these skills through practice, right? You can learn that when you're in those uncomfortable situations, there is a way to relieve the discomfort, and that is by doing that thing that makes you uncomfortable in the first place. Like if you get thrown in the lake and you don't like swimming, the way to, or you don't like the water rather, the way to fix that is to start swimming. If you get thrown into a networking meeting or an Arte event or a conference or whatever, and you don't like doing that shit, the way to relieve that pain is to start doing that shit. And the more you do it, the more reps you put in, just like anything else, you're working that muscle. And even if that muscle is really small and almost non-existent when you start, if you keep doing it over time, that muscle starts growing and developing. And before you know it, that uncomfortable thing that used to really plague you now isn't so bad. I still feel it. Like I get the butterflies, I get the weird, the dry throat when I go in those situations. But as soon as I start rolling and doing my thing, that all is out the window. And then I'm acting on muscle memory. So you can definitely learn it. The other thing too is you touched on it. Some people have it and some people don't. And so the marathon thing is actually a great analogy. There's two types of people. So you obviously have been practicing and running these crazy long races for a long time. So you're at a different level than a new guy, right? So you can either go into these races not really knowing what you're doing and look for someone like yourself to help pull you through, to help you. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's just a certain mentality. Well, I met a guy recently, actually had lunch with him today. He's not a runner, never has been. And he is committed to run a marathon here in the end of the summer. He's doing a 10K, I think, and then a marathon in the early fall. And he's going to finish it. I can tell just by talking with him. He's of the other mindset, that other mindset where you're going to kick the fucking door down and run like a crazy man, no matter what happens, and cross that finish line. And I think as a leader, it's key to be able to kind of figure out both of those individuals, right? And there's probably other aspects of personality that go into it, but if you can figure out which people just need to be led, which people need to be pulled through the marathon, and which people can you just smack them in the ass and open the gate and let them run. There's different motivations for both of them, and there should be different rewards for both of them too. We do a lot of that. We do a lot of trial by fire type training at the construction company, and it's by design. We have a newer employee with us, and I bring this person with me to as many meetings, as many presentations, as many walkthroughs as I possibly can, because a lot of that sort of stuff too, you can learn through osmosis, right? And if this person can watch me do it, not that I'm some friggin' genius or fantastic at it, but at least this person can watch me do it at a high level. Eventually they're going to start picking up on some of those aspects. And then that's how you form your own way of doing things too, is you can pick little bits here and there, and then stick them together into a mold of how you are and how you're going to operate. And then sometimes it takes me just putting that person, literal trial by fire. Well, okay, training time's over. Now you're going to run this presentation, and I'll be there for backup. I'll be there to help. I won't let the train come off the rails for too long, but you're the top dog here, and I'm just going to sit back and watch. And I think all of those things are appropriate in it. And it also helps as a leader you'll quickly see which kind of person you're dealing with. Do you need the person who wants and needs to be pulled through the marathon, or do you have the type of person who's going to just do it and just run it and race it out? And it seems to be working for us anyways.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I'll go back to is understanding what you need from each role within the company, right? There are some people that, like, you don't need to be outgoing, right? Your admin person, secretary, they just need to answer the phone, right? And be comfortable in doing that and come in doing that, right? They don't, maybe you want them to really expand and do more and, take on more responsibility. Maybe, it's just the stuff you came in and hired them for. And if they're, and I think this is the hard thing for us too, as driven, want to do more, want to grow type of people. It's hard for me to relate to the people that don't want to do more or grow or take on more responsibility. It's one thing if it gets thrusted upon them or they know where their line is, right? Like my wife knows where her line of responsibility kind of is, or she wants it to be. She knows she could take on more, but the ramifications of that, tend to be, it's not slight in their uptick, right, and taking on some of these responsibilities, it's massive.
Landslide.
Yeah, and like, and she knows that. And I think a lot of people are, well, they really fall. She is very aware, right, in that, in the responsibility. Like, I just want it, you want it, right? That's who we are, who we're built for. Like, we're built to take on all the responsibility. And there's people like her where she's aware that she doesn't want it, and then there are people that really just want to do their job. They don't really want any responsibility, but they're responsible enough of themselves to show up, do the work, do a good job, go home and live a good life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with any of those. And as leaders, we just have to make sure that we put the right people in those right spots and understand that like when you hire a high school kid, you have different expectations of the guy that's coming in as a superintendent, or, like your lead estimator, or, a chief operating officer, right? Those are all different expectation levels across the board. We just have to understand, like, what do you want out of this? And it's having that conversation with your given individual of like, dude, where do you want to go? Right? I had this conversation with one of the engineers I hired, and like, man, what do you want to do? You want to take my job as a department head? Do you want to be a project manager? Do you want to just be a project engineer? Like, there's no wrong answer here. I just want to know so I can put you on the right track.
That's exactly it. And we do the same thing. We have 3-year plan meetings every 6 months with all of our employees, and it's that same question. And there's no right or wrong answer. I'm happy to say that through our entire ranks now, I no longer have clock punchers, right? I have people now in every role on my team that are excited to do things, and I can see them get like giddy when they come up with new ideas and bring off the wall or different ideas to me to talk about. And they're not just waiting for 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock to roll around so they can duck out the door unseen. We've been through that too, and again, there's nothing wrong with that, like you said, but it's a lot more fun from my perspective if I have everybody kind of like, hell yeah, we can actually affect a change in this place. Like, we have some buy-in on what happens here and which way Matt decides to go with these things. We can actually influence it. So it's been really cool to see. We're pushing up close on time here, but I want to get to the last one. And this one actually comes from last week's show we did with Bob and Pat McDonald. They brought up this idea of holding a personal development meeting on a weekly basis with their entire team. And the more I have been thinking about that conversation, the more I keep thinking that is a fantastic idea. And we didn't get real heavy into it with those guys. We talked kind of on the surface level, but that's what I wanted to kind of poke you with, because I can see it going different ways with different people, especially in my group. I'm going to be selfish here and talk about our team, my team. It's going to go both ways, at least in the beginning. So how, in your mind, do I, or does anybody go about starting something like this and encouraging people and driving enthusiasm for everyone to take part in a personal development journey in some form or fashion? I don't want everybody to, let me rephrase that. I don't expect everyone to do 75 hard and live hard program with me. If they all wanted to, my God, we'd be unstoppable. But I have realistic expectations of people, right? But everyone can do something to develop themselves, to get a little bit better. Just that, even if it's that 1% a day theory, how do I get people interested and involved in doing something like that?
I mean, so in all honesty, like, I've never run anything like this in the companies. I mean, the closest I've come was we did two things. We did like Wisdom Wednesday at one of the firms that I worked in, and that, I kicked off to basically do a, educational topic that got sent out to the company, and it was all like around what we did as a firm, right? So in that particular firm, we did a lot of educational spaces. So it was like a topic from somebody around like what we did as a firm to kind of continue that professional development. And so, like, again, having always worked in like professional firms, right, as architects, engineers, we have to do continuing education, professional development hours. So we always had like lunch and learns, right, around like a given, shit, I took one on like bollards. which actually was pretty fascinating because like a lot of it was like a security stuff, not as like the decorative bollards, but like, that they're pounding them 20 feet down to stop a tank or a car, or, all the fast release stuff. But like, some weird stuff like that to, transformers and like panels or new innovations that, came through in like a floor box, right? Like all that was always in like the professional development setting that we have to do anyway to keep up our continuing education hours for our licenses. So in professional services firms, like, nothing was ever formal around like personal development, right? Like reading or any of this stuff or books and whatnot. What I've from some of the guys, that I talked to, that like one leads a sales organization, that has been successful, is like book of the month club, right? Like he gets, picks a book. Obviously, it's like all around sales because again, he's in sales. So he hands his whole team, like here's the book. We're all going to read it, and let's see what we get out of it. So stuff like that, and do it in meetings, and you bring up topics, and whether you cover a chapter or three or whatever, a meeting a week, I think is how he does it. That can be easy lead in to the whole professional development side of it. And then again, like our culture in most every firm that I worked in, we just always had vendors come in, man. Like there was rarely a week we didn't have somebody coming in giving a presentation on a certain topic. So, one, if that's not already in there, is, start lining up all the vendors come in, bring lunch, and you do all your lunch and learns. And then two, the like book of the month club or whatever, where you get a book for everybody, and, start with something easy, like don't
Right.
go into like, laws of success and 700 pages. Like that just scares people. But, some like 200-page book, Think and Grow Rich, or, like Winning, Relentless, like start with books like that, to where it's easy to get into. It's not a hard read. You're not like going through old English or anything like that.
I like that idea. That's one that I've thought of for a while. Kind of having a library almost of sorts of that sort of book, personal development type books, on hand, and then starting some sort of book club or whatever. Although I hate that term, it makes me think of Oprah Winfrey. But the point of it that is well taken. I don't know. It's one I kind of struggle with on how to do this and how to get people excited. Because not everybody's going to get excited about, working out or whatever. But one of the ideas that I came up with, and I'm going to go ahead and spit it out here, and it'll help hold myself accountable. But I want to put on a ruck style event in September for construction suicide awareness month. And for me, that's going to force me to kind of, plan an actual event. And it's obviously going to be more than the 8 people that work in our organization. I want it to be a large kind of big movement, big thing. But that's kind of another idea I've had. And hopefully from doing that, I can spin it off into, maybe we do a weekly ruck as a team, or a weekly hike, or, you don't have to put on the weighted backpack if you don't want to, but a weekly get the fuck outside and move for 45 minutes to an hour. And we can do it, during work time. So I'm not asking people to, take time away from their family or to stay after or anything like that. So I don't know, man. It's just one of the things I've been kicking around upstairs here.
Yeah, the only other thing that comes to mind for like this is you need some. I mean, one is just to introduce it, right? Like again, this is the whole like execute the plan versus like planning to plan. Um, but that being said, like I think a lot of folks, you might get through or have a plan for the first meeting or two. After that, you're like, man, what do we do? How do we go through it?
Yes.
Right? What's next? I got the first one in mind, and you want to come out of the gate like strong. And then everyone's like, yeah, they just get scared, and it's a shock factor. Like when I implemented scrum meetings where I had a 15-minute meeting with everybody, like again, because it was daily, like everybody got the gist of it like within 2 weeks. Like, we have a call, this is what we do, here's how we go, and then they, everybody's on board. So with this, like, you whatever you end up doing, you end up having to be consistent about it. But it's also not bad. And the thing that I got to thinking about is to have an event to kick it off, right? Whether you go to Tony Robbins, the thing is, like, for any of these events, and this is the thing that I highly recommend for most of you, do not sit together. Like, do not sit together as a group, because you all want to talk individually about whatever's going on, and you're not necessarily paying attention to the speakers. Like, I've seen a ton of these groups show up to these events. They all get in their little group. They don't interact with anybody around them. It is purely like you, your group, and that is it, right? In a arena of 10,000 people. So, and you probably don't express things the way that you would around a bunch of strangers as to people you got to go back to life with. Yeah. So if you do go to these events, one, like a thing like 3-7 when you're rucking or going outside, and or some other thing like that, is, that's a team building event. That's a, with lessons mixed in. That's a way to, like, create those bonds with folks. Now, a thing like Tony Robbins, you go, you don't sit together, and then you come back, and then you have that, like, momentum of, we just went to an event, we did this together, we did it as a team, and now you can kick off, like, okay, we're going to do book club. We're going to take all these lessons from Tony and implement them, in a consistent manner, so that you all got the knowledge simultaneously, and then you can, like, systematically disperse it. And that's usually, or, you're like me and you go by yourself, and, an organization, and no one else has ever done any of this, and you come back and you're like, yeah. And then everyone's like, you're crazy. So one is just be consistent, more than anything, man. Pick a book, pick a thing, pick a activity, add it in, and, pick a week. Like, if you're going to do a ruck, pick a topic, pick a thing to talk about while you're out there.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And you got to lead from the front. You got to lead by example too. I mean, we've talked about it before. I've learned it the hard way. I've learned it over and over again. You got to lead by example. And if you're not doing it and actually living it and believing it, then sure as shit, no one else is going to.
Yeah. And it could be too, like, for the first, book, or even, every time that a new one comes up, like, hey, you got 3 to pick from.
Yeah. Get some options out there.
The team picks, stuff like that, versus just forcing it down everybody, and then to bring it up, put things in, and, that's reading it for sure needs to be put through. Like, man, I asked every boss that I worked for, like, what was the last book they read, and they couldn't rattle it off, and it's sad. So
really is.
Don't be that guy, but
don't be that dude. Well, hey man, I don't know. I kind of like this format as one we sprinkle in here and there. We could do it both ways, but I think it was a fun show. I got to get out of here soon to go Uber some children around. So you got any last thoughts?
Guys, just be great. I mean, the world that we're living in, like, I can't do politics anymore. Like, I really can't. At the end of the day, be good to your neighbor. You know the right thing to do. You know the right direction to go. You got to be more aggressive than you probably think you are right now. Even if you think you're aggressive, it's probably not enough. I know for sure I'm not doing enough and pushing hard enough, and that's getting remedied as we speak. So do more, be good, and keep learning, guys. And thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. And with that, that's this episode of the Construction Corner Podcast. Until next time.